In order to bring in a state of communism, they have to remove our rights.
Well, all right. So we are back with my good sister from another mister, Jane Scharf. How are you, girl?
Very good, brother from another mother.
I love it. I love it. And today we're going to dig right into this because people, I think, are really being edified by these videos that you and I are doing together. And that's what we want to do. We want to help people empower themselves with the truth and things like the Canadian Bill of Rights and why the bill is so much better and so important. Certainly in really learning that we have a great structure here and we don't want to be distracted from that very structure that we know is already here, it's already in place. So our theme here today is that you and I are trying to push, and I would suggest Stand For Thee as well, and Rebecca Shepherd, Kelly Hale, Dave Freedom, and anybody else that's kind of rolling along with us. We're pushing for accountability, not some kind of revolution, because the structure is there. So we are seeking, as citizens, as individuals, accountability, not revolution.
What kind of system?
In the system that is a common law system based on, go ahead.
The common law system of democracy.
Democracy.
And that means the sovereign are the people, not the state, not the monarch, not the UN, not the WEF, not the World Health Organization, the people of Canada.
And so you would argue, and I think I would be in total agreement with you, that they're actually trying to redefine democracy to kind of make it look like, well, that's about, you have a two-party system and, you get to vote which party you like. That's not what democracy means. That's an illusion. Democracy is the power is in the people's hands. That's what it means. And that's why they're also trying to redefine it so that people, citizens in Canada, don't know what it means, and then they kind of throw up their hands. So in this structure that we do have in our common law country, within a constitution where it's a one-sided promise, where the people that we decide should hold these offices are subject to what we want, and we talked about trial by jury, so that just in case they introduce a statute that's inappropriate, the jury, for example, can not only find someone potentially innocent, but they can also say, hey, that law was crummy. So, for example, I had more than 5 people at my house, for example, in 2021, at my house for Thanksgiving dinner. And if they charged me with that in a trial by jury, that jury could say, well, that mandate, that policy is the problem, not shade, right? And so we need to really push that idea that structure is there for us and that the Constitution isn't something that they can write out of existence.
Yes.
And so we have some folks, and we don't need to name names because what we want you to do, everybody individually, have the power to recognize when there's folks trying to get you to exit the system. So please elaborate on that idea that what's the problem with anybody who's telling you need to exit the system? What's the problem with that? And what is that really? Because I'm going to suggest to you that that's the tactic of those, and I'm thinking you're agreeing, that's a tactic of those who want to subvert the country.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
In order to bring in a state of communism, they have to remove our rights. And they have to also take power over business. So the church and business and the people. Those are the 3 elements that they have to use. Now, one of the main tactics they use to get themselves from this democracy to their form of communism, they need to destabilize and demoralize the people so that they're no longer respecting and supporting their own system, their own constitution, their own their own representatives, bureaucrats, police officers, and so on. So they do an enormous amount of work and they're paid. You can see they do it. Many of them, some of them are just passing a message because they believe these people or whatever, and they're passing a message. But you can really tell the pattern of somebody that's been trained. It's very systematic. So you'll hear, all your police are fascist, all your government's corrupt, all your courts are corrupt. And they put it out as though they're on your side and they're lamenting, that this is such a sad, bad thing, and we, the people, have to get together and do something about this, organize against this. And what they recommend is exiting the system. What that looks like is don't pay your taxes, don't pay any tickets, don't cooperate with anything they say or do, and in general, don't support or respect any of the authority or anything that's going on there. And of course, if that catches hold, and I think even like Trudeau even plays his part in that, like tweaking us, with his crap, so that we'll get enraged and we'll believe that, like we have to do something. We have to get together and do something. That's what they put out all the time. They even, this meeting I was at this week, put a picture out that I guess Mussolini used to use, with a picture of a stick, one stick by itself, and then a pack of sticks that are bound. And the message is, by yourself, you're weak and you're nothing. But if you're in a group, you're strong. So come in our group and we're going to exit the system with you. And then you're going to have what they're redefining as democracy. And
Right.
It's pretty scary stuff.
And the interesting thing is, because they're kind of pushing that idea, and so because the system is broken,
Yes.
rather, no, that's an illusion. The system is there. They're just doing what we call oftentimes that old school passage, if you will, that says the bait and switch. That's what they're doing. And so they're kind of drawing you away from what is already in place, because that's the item that's a problem for them, actually. So like the Canadian Bill of Rights is a big problem for them. And that's why they try to always distract you from that enshrined piece of
the bait is
legislation.
Coming to a system where everybody is equal. That's the bait. That's the bait that I bit onto when I was 18, 19.
Right.
And sadly, up till about 25, I bit into that. And the switch is, the system you go into is a severe two-tiered system. And yes, in fact, everybody's all equal. Like all those people that used to be in business aren't in business anymore. They're all on the same level. We have nothing, and we're all equal.
Right.
Well,
and one of the signs, and that's the switch, because one of the signs that they're pulling that is because ultimately they'll say, we're going to make everybody equal, but they don't tell you how they're going to manage this quote unquote equality. And by the way, a little side note on that, what that removes is what the Canadian Bill of Rights talks about, individual rights, because part of that sometimes is, listen, some people may want to be, more, feisty about their business and make a chain, and other people might want just their little mom and pop shop, right? Like not everybody necessarily, and that's why you want individual civil liberty, so people can choose how much of their time in this life they want to invest into business or into family time or into how, whatever it is that they might, right? So this idea, they kind of push this collective idea, but that's actually not what they're shooting for. What they're shooting for is to bind everybody here, right? And so, like you said, the extremes, it's going to be extreme, like, debased, and then those who are towing their fun line and you're part of the club. There's two parts.
Yeah.
That's part of that's because they don't tell you how they're going to achieve this wonderful equality. You're just
supposed to trust the plan.
Trust the plan. And that's another distraction.
They said in Russia, that's where that was coined, in Russia when they took over, the communists took over. That was what they told everybody. Trust the plan. Trust the plan. Right. We're going to derail the monarchy and trust the plan. Now, that country did need a revolution, but they didn't need that communist style of revolution. They needed a real revolution where the people, like at the time of the Magna Carta, that was a revolution. That was the people saying, whoa, 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 whoa. enough. If you want to be the king, here's the way it's going to go down. And then the king agreed, and then they had that base, that what I consider to be a democratic base to move forward. And and we evolved over time a pretty lengthy set of rights that are pretty well captured in the Bill of Rights. Maybe not all, but most of them are captured there. But the communist style is they're not bringing you somewhere that is utopic. Yeah, they're bringing you to probably a worse situation than they were in with their monarchy, with their traditional monarchy.
And you can, quite frankly, you could kind of sense that direction in the last 3 years. So I think that's where we have some good news, because I think a lot of Canadian citizens are very much aware that was going darker, not more pretty and yes. Oreo cookies and cream. It was going quite the opposite, right?
And actually, most people have figured out where the ooze is coming from. So the people now that are trying to draw you into their spider web pretend that they are not part of the UN and that they are helping you protect yourself against the UN and get the UN out of your country and all this stuff. But again, they don't tell you how.
Exactly.
They don't tell you what that's going to look like. And
there's usually a theme of we got to exit the system attached to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the Bill of Rights real quick, if you don't mind, good brother Dom. Pull up the Canadian Bill of Rights for me real quick, because I want to show everybody how it goes out of its way to talk about use the word individual. Okay, and that's ultimately, guys, what we're trying to communicate here, right? That each individual has situations, and when you empower yourself with the knowledge of these good, true, I'll say constitutional laws, you empower yourself, then you can deal with a person that's causing a situation directly yourself. And if each individual can do that, then now collectively we are individually working together. Okay, we don't have to hive mind under this one revolution, or we're all going to exit the system and be, I don't know, buy a little village somewhere, kind of like that movie The Village, and it all fell apart, or watch the movie The Beach and it all falls apart. No. Each individual can deal because everybody's going to have a different situation that's going to come to them. And that's why self-empowerment in this, in the legal stratosphere, if you will, is very important. So, and by the way, I'm going to suggest something. You can have to consider it yourself as the listener. When someone is trying to move you to empower yourself, then I would suggest there's no ulterior motive. When someone is trying to draw you to their personal plan, you might want to be a little suspicious of that move, you see. So that's a big part of the reason. It's not the only reason, but part of the reason why I really admire what Jane and Rebecca and Dave Freedom and Kelly Hale are doing. They're trying to tell each person, right, to do their thing with this, and therefore their motive isn't self-indulgent. It's to help you. So something for you to consider. But as you'll notice in section 1 here of the Canadian Bill of Rights, it says, it is hereby recognized, very important, that the Bill of Rights is recognizing, not giving, recognizing, and it's declaring, okay, this document is declaring that in Canada there have existed, that means everything it's about to say, you already had it. Okay, so this was received royal assent in 1960. It's saying you already had these rights. That's what it's saying. And shall continue to exist. In other words, this document will not interfere. Okay? Without discrimination by reason of race, national origin, color, religion, sex, the following human rights and the fundamental freedoms, namely, okay, so I would suggest not limited to, but namely, primarily, if you will. And here's the word, the right of the individual. You see that self-empowerment that I believe Mr. Diefenbaker was aware of, that was required so that each individual gets to have this right to, and we're going to focus today a little bit on life and liberty. Life and liberty. All right. But, and the fact that it's saying the right of the individual. Okay, that's why it's important, because not everybody wants to have the same religion. Not everybody wants to say the same thing in their speech all the time, right? Not everybody wants to blog, freedom of the press here, about the same things, right? That's why the individual, and in B it says the same thing, the right of the individual to equality. See how he continues to push this word individual, all right? So this is a reminder, folks, that each individual has these. So this is very important. So if you don't mind, Jane, can we just focus on life and liberty? Because we've heard oftentimes saying, well, especially I'm going to suggest the people that are working for the, globally type of people. I like calling them globally. It's funny for me. And these global style of folks, they will say things, to appease, I would suggest. The Bill of Rights was great for its time, but it needed more in there. It needed more in there. So can I have you elaborate based on your, not only the knowledge that you have, but the case law that we've seen in the common law in our history, life and liberty, those are two super huge words that is being acknowledged and recognized here for each individual. Could you expound upon that for me? And if you don't mind, Brother Don, we can stop sharing. I want to hear Jane on this. Life and liberty for each individual. How big are those two small words?
Well, they're at the top of the pyramid for a reason. They're in the first segment, and they're at the top of the first segment of the rights, because they embody basically our living existence. These are the items that they're most after to make their shift, their reset, because their main goal, as we can see on the UN website, is to how do they even put it? Protect the what is it called? To ensure the survival of the human race by protecting the environment.
And that's that whole,
yes,
global cooling, global warming, climate change. Hey, but isn't it coming upon what they used to call autumn or fall? Yeah, it's climate change. Are you sure? Because I thought pretty soon it's going to be snow too, right? Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So anyway, the with life and liberty, the reason why they need to basically do something to negate that is because with regard to liberty, I'll do liberty first. They have an agenda, and what do they call them? Their aims. To reduce the world's consumption in order to protect the planet from carbon emissions. And some of what they're already well into to bring this about is putting us all in a 15-minute district where we can't travel outside that district. And they're also fast at work trying to combine all the data so they can get a full tabs on everything you spend, so that they can start setting restrictions on your consumption. You have to eat less, you have to buy less food, whatever other thing you buy.
And we got a bit of taste of when you lose your liberty, when they tell you can't have more than 5 people in your home, even for celebrations, for example. You got a taste of what that looked like. And by the way, good old Canadian CBC, they love to have little mantras like, if you see something, say something. Getting the neighbors to rat on you, total subversion technique, total commie technique, right? Because that would cause, Shade's got 2 or 3 cars in his driveway. He must be having a big soiree over there. We're going to make a funny little phone call. And those are all ways to subvert the country. And of course, they always have, that's good that you did that. It's good that you stuck your nose in your neighbor's business because he wanted to have, Thanksgiving dinner with grandma. And it was great that that you called and tried to get him in big trouble, because, you don't want to be able to have, Thanksgiving dinner with your family, right? So those are the types of tactics where you see they were gnawing at liberty, weren't they?
Yeah. Yes. And life, they need to get at that also, because their aim is to reduce the world's population by 90% at a rate of 10 to 15% per year until they reach that goal. And of course, they can't do that legally under our Canadian Bill of Rights. So they have to try and, do tactics to get around that, to negate.
But they could do it under the charter, couldn't they?
It was designed for that.
So,
and
Brother
actually,
Dom,
I think it was on one of your scripture shows when it just clicked in my mind. Well, I was going around saying is they can override any of your rights, blah, 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 with Section 1. And then one day I was like, oh, holy crap. Yeah. Life is in there too. And it wasn't protected. It's not like Section 1, you can override all these rights, but not that right. No. It's all
any of the ones. And interesting, because I did a video. Yeah. So Brother Dom, do me a favor, pull up the charter real quick, and we'll kind of try to explain this. I think we got a link to the charter, I think, right? We'll get it real quick anyways. Yeah. All right. There you go. Oh, cool. So as we've mentioned many times, guys, just so you guys can see this, okay? So we got the Section 1, right? Okay, so this is where we tell you how it says, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, but then it says subject only to such reasonable limits, right? And of course, there's no
out in it versus what we saw in the Bill of Rights, which said that this legislation recognizes your rights, not gives you rights. This sentence here means the government gives you your rights, or they're trying to, convey that.
They're trying to convey that message, and that gives people the illusion that they actually have the right to do it. When we have a Bill of Rights that says, no, we're acknowledging, not only are we recognizing and acknowledge that you have these rights, we're recognizing and that they already existed before we wrote the Canadian Bill of Rights. So that's why the Bill of Rights is so powerful.
And that the government needs to protect those rights, the bill describes. So it puts an onus, a direct, absolute onus on the state to respect those rights with no limits.
With no limits. And here, so this is what Jane and I are talking. So now if you have this clause in the charter that says they can limit, now go to Section 7, where you have your life, liberty, and security of person. Well, guess what, guys? Based on how this poo-poo charter is written, they can limit that too. See what they're doing here? Look at and any lawyer worth their salt, they'll recognize this. And anybody who doesn't is just either ignorant to the point of malice now, or quite frankly, is in on the game. It's one of the two. So if your life and liberty is here, but they can, quote unquote, limit it, right? Then that means they can indeed, based on how this, right? If you, especially, right? If you,
and notice it doesn't say if they go to the court and they demonstrate to the court that it's a justified limit. They don't even have to go to the court. They can just pull it out of their butt. There you go.
Willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly, yep.
So and so, by the way, if we limited your life, you could come back to court and put in an application, unless, of course, we've limited your life.
Come back to haunt them.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to do it in ghost form, according to the poo-poo charter over here, right? So again, guys, we can't stress this enough. You need to really get people to understand that this is how this document is written. And I really, quite frankly, no. Am I a lawyer? No, but I know how to read. I know how to read. And this says that these rights that they've set out in here, they're implying, which is not true. They're giving that illusion, but they're trying to give you the illusion that they're the ones who give you the rights, and therefore they're the ones who get to limit it. And so anything that's listed in here, they'll say, oh, yeah. Kind of like in the Church of God situation where they said, oh, yeah, we definitely went against your right to religion. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we did. But of course, that was reasonable when we did it. See?
Yes.
And so same thing here. It's the same thought process will apply. Same thought process. That's how this piece of junk is written. And I'm going to suggest to you that's why we need to really communicate to people that the Bill of Rights is there. And I'm going to go back to that and remind everybody how important it is that we bring them to this place, that this is, again, as it was mentioning here, an act for the recognition and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, right? That's what it's for. And
first, this charter says rights, not human rights.
Yes.
And it says freedoms, not fundamental freedoms. Those are huge differences.
And I don't believe it. Does it ever say individual?
I don't think so. I'm just discovering tonight, because you discovered individual written so many times in the bill. And I'm just wondering if it's in the charter, but I don't see it in the charter.
So this is very important. So now let's do me a favor, good brother Dom, pull up that UN-ish document, because we're going to talk about how they're trying to redefine what a human right is, right? And again, take it out of the individual. See, because that's what happened, right? I, as an individual, thought, I ain't wearing a muzzle. You can't tell me what to put over my face. What are you talking about? You know, suddenly if I expose my nose, it's public nudity? When did that start? You know what I mean? So I, of course, did not. Neither did my wife nor my children. And we walked in that truth. Okay? And in doing so, because I knew that I was doing nothing wrong by not gagging myself for anybody. And I'm going to suggest to you strongly that that's the position each individual needed to take. However, those who didn't, but those who did. And that's why it's very important that we have individual rights. All right. So if I'm drywalling, I might choose to put some kind of mask over my face, but not if I'm going shopping for sour cream and onions. Okay. So let's take a look here, though, because the commie push, if you will, or the subversion push, is to get a whole bunch of people in the country to hate whoever is standing on those individual rights. You're selfish. You're only thinking about yourself because you're not following all the rules. Well, we know what rule following gets you, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the whole idea, right? That's what breaks up the morality, breaks up families, and it really harms the country.
And it also does something very significant too, which is all part of the same thing. Like our liberal government's been infiltrated. Like that horse is out of the barn running around. Like if anybody doesn't know that by now, like Chinese interference, that it's been fully confirmed. CSIS confirms it. RCMP confirms it. So the way that fuels the fire is the ones that have infiltrated the country are aggravating the people to get them stirred up, so that the people will say, you know, we don't respect this system, we don't trust this system, we're going to withdraw from the system. So that's the part they're playing. They're trying to inspire the people to revolt against the government, instead of holding those people who are doing this aggravating accountable for their criminal activity, because they're doing this in conspiracy with foreign power. Because WEF is part of the UN, and the UN is a foreign power because it has military. And the definition, or not the definition, but the description of the responsibility of the MPs and the senators is that they not be a formal part of any foreign party. It doesn't say foreign government, foreign party.
Beautiful. So that's huge.
They've put their names up on there. So I dare say, when people kind of put that all together and turn around and say, hey, this is against the law, and, you know, point to the RCMP and push, it'll happen. It happened with Magna Carta in an environment that didn't even have the law and the structure to protect it. It happened there. So it certainly can happen here. And so what we're doing here is just trying to remind ourselves and others that we are the sovereign and we hold the key. We do hold the key, and it's our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. So we have to use it before we lose it, because if these guys can convince enough people that we need to exit the system and our system collapses, which is what they want, then they step in and they got us.
And the ones they want to have that, dare I say it, would be the people, because clearly the ones who comply, they comply. So what they're trying to do, because there's enough people that are against it, that's a good sign. But they're trying to take that freedom movement, right, and reduce how many are going in the right direction. So they're trying to get the people who are into freedom to go in the wrong direction. And that wrong direction would be go ahead and exit the system, right? Rather than use the system that's very, very much in place and grab a hold of that very sovereign position that you already have. So that would only harm the freedom movement. That's why you're seeing so many different kind of distractions. And we'll talk about that if we have an opportunity in a little bit. So let's get to this part here where it talks about environment, right? So they're using this much like they did with the, C19 stuff. They use that as the excuse to try to make you muzzle your face. Don't go visit grandma and grandpa, right? They use that. Well, this is also, they always have a problem that they, display for you in their little black magic ways to convince you, right, that we need to alter what we've had. No. The history and the precedents has made it very, very clear. And that's why they attack every single solitary civil liberty. If you look at the Bill of Rights, they attacked each and every one of those. So here's their position, right? They talk about a clean and healthy environment. It's required to achieve the sustainable development goals, right? And to counter the triple planetary crisis, right? See, here's a problem. We got to fix this problem. And the only way we can do it is if we all come together, and we have to ignore our individual rights and individual freedoms. You got to get rid of that. You got to care about this, thing we got going on.
Can we bring up the wording for that collective right, I call it? A communist collective right?
Is it the yellow one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'll read this part. Okay, it says, UN right to clean air and environment. See that? And it says on July 28th, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution which declared access to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment to be a universal human right. And then it says, go ahead, Jane.
Go ahead. No, you finish.
Because then it says this concept of, look at the difference now here, folks, collective rights. See, rather than individual. Huge difference.
Think about the structure of that. I would like the people to think about the structure of that.
Right.
When we
That's
talk
right.
about individual rights, these are boundaries for the government. These are the kinds of things we need to keep ourselves equal and sovereign and healthy and having a striving environment.
That would be individual rights.
That's individual rights. But a collective right is something that the government does for everybody.
Which you just witnessed.
Yes. And they define that as being the most important right. And so important is it, they say, that they must override your individual rights to achieve the goal of maintaining this collective right.
And who gets to define what that collective right is? It's them. That's right.
So what we're recommending is, for the 15-minute cities, for example, find out if your councillor voted for it. And if so, sue them. Use small claims court. Give them a notice. We call it notice of liability. We have one on stanfordy.ca website. And all NOLs are not the same. Ours are different. We call them progressive NOLs because we're notifying them that there's liability in what they're doing. So we spell out what they're doing wrong, how that's a violation of the law, how it's harming us, what they have to do to fix it. And if they don't fix it, you're going to court. So the next step is going to court. And you can use small claims court, which is low risk and simple. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need wheelbarrows full of money. But if, even one is going to be a pain in the ass for them because they have to show up. They have to, file papers and do all that. And they have to pay their lawyer to do that. Plus you get them, they have to come personally to court. and be questioned in the process. So that in and of itself would be worth the small amount of money that process would cost to do it. So whether you win or you lose, there's still going to be accountability happening there, and they're going to have to pay dearly for it because they have to pay their lawyer through that whole process. Well, they don't have to, but they probably will, to try and avoid, because you have a clear case. So they're going to need some Philadelphia lawyers lawyering to try and wangle their way out of it, because they clearly, by voting 15-minute city with no consultation with the public, that severely violates your civil liberties, is clearly a violation of their fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty is they're supposed to put your interests higher than their interests. So how is that the case? Like these things are not in our interest whatsoever, and they weren't attained through consent or even consultation. So I don't even think it would be a big stretch to and they're gonna and what we're asking for rectification, we're asking them to, because all of this stuff they're doing is all voluntary. You know what I mean? Like all the participation with the UN right now is voluntary. There's no requirement in our law that we even talk to the UN, never mind listen to their directives and participate in their little agreements and all these things. So we're saying to the counselor in these cases is, we want you, like for the rectification, we're asking you to go back to your counselor and tell them, or sorry, we're talking to the counselor. We're asking the counselor to go back to the city and say that they withdraw their support for the 15-minute city. And if they don't, they're getting it. And I think you're going to see a lot of interest in, okay, how do we get out of this now? Especially from people that just go along because they get, it's easier and they get perks for doing it, stuff like that. When they start getting their ass kicked, you're going to see a different position. I truly, truly believe that with all my heart. And the school, just quickly, what's going on in schools with this sexualization of children. Also, there's a good way to deal with this. And that's also with a notice of liability, which we also have on the standforthe.ca. You can just use it as an outline. You can change it anywhere you want. But it's outlining what's being done. And in one case, there's discrimination going on. If they're allowing a flag of one group, but no other groups, that's discrimination. Because the Bill of Rights says every individual has the right to equal treatment and equal protection of the law. So your child's going to school, they don't get to put their flag up, but the other one puts their flag up. That's a violation. Or if it's programming like for one group, like an awareness to the issues of one group and one group only, also discrimination.
And what I like about that approach is we're not speaking, right? Because of course we have our moral position on it and we're allowed to certainly have it. However, we're not talking in that construct in public. We're not talking about the morality of it. We're talking about the discriminatory practice you're taking in doing that. It's not fair. It's not appropriate because it's not fair. We're not talking, you decide for yourself, on the behavior part individually, you can make that decision. But when you're putting a flag up or pushing a specific agenda of a certain group, that's discriminatory towards other groups. And therefore, it's either put up the flags for everybody, if you will, or put them up for nobody. Those are the only two fair options. And then that kind of starts to squash the propaganda. And then as the propaganda potentially gets squashed, then maybe people who really do disagree with it, but they're kind of being quiet about it because, they don't want to, stir the boat or whatever it is, or stir the pot too much. That might actually give them a little confidence to go, okay, wait a minute, then they really can't do this. And then it might remind them that actually these types of behaviors, this type of propagation is indeed discriminatory.
The last thing I wanted to say is that I think a good concept to consider is that the Constitution, and with its counterparts like the Criminal Code and the Canadian Bill of Rights and there's protection of privacy laws and all that kind of thing, that is our social contract, and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't mean that there's nothing in it that should be changed and everything is wonderfully perfect, but it's got lots of babies in it. So don't be tricked into thinking that it doesn't have any value. It's crappy and it's attached to the queen or the king and oh my god. Well, that doesn't even mean anything. It means the all it means in a democracy. Actually, we have a democratic monarchy, which means that the queen is subject to the sovereign, and her role is to protect the sovereign. Okay,
Which is us.
which is us. So when we say we're signing allegiance to the queen, it's not the person; it's the sovereign, like all of us together.
So,
One
and so,
big
bottom line, based on the Magna Carta, if Mr. Prince Charles continues operating in the wrong direction, there's a good chance we're going to be able to take his
yeah,
castle.
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to ride his favorite horse. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
going to go get one of his chariots, and I'm going to have a big soiree with that
Hey,
thing.
hey, Philly, we need to have a talk here.
Yeah, I think you know what? I really like his dinner table.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to take that for a while until he changes his mind, and then I'll give it back to him.
yeah, for sure.
Right? I love
Yeah,
it, and
61.
that's really go
That's
ahead.
Article 61
Article
of
61 of the
Magna
Magna
Carta
Carta.
says if these officials get out of line, take their property. So that's what we're recommending to do. If these officials, such as teachers, such as counselors and mayors and all that, get out of line, disrespect your rights, take their property.
And
There you
and
go.
we would do that legally.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Through the small claims court, which is our court.
That's
It's a court where everything's capped. So if you go into the big court, that's a very, very scary place to be. It takes a long time. It's very complex, very difficult for a novice to navigate, and there's a great risk of debt going in there in case you lose.
right.
Everything's capped in small claims court, so there's not even that big risk of complete financial ruin. Like the maximum legal bill, okay, at the end of the day, even if it gets stretched out and dragged out and everything else, it's 15% of what you're asking for. So if you ask for the maximum in small claims court, it's 35,000. Now sometimes the
So
court can award,
15% of that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it would be somewhere
15%
around
of
5 grand.
5,200. Yeah. Now sometimes they do put like fines on it, but it's still not very much. It's still like it doesn't even hold a candle to the total legal debt that they're actually incurring. So if they win, they still lose because it's going to cost them probably around $50,000 to defend themselves, and they'll get 5,200 and maybe a little slap of a fine, which they sometimes put on if the winning side had tried to settle and the losing side had said no. Sometimes they'll give another little slap, but it's nothing. Like it's nothing you're not going to lose your house. You're not going to lose your future. Your kids can't go to university or whatever. And if you know 2 or 3 other parents in the same place, you can all 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 go on the same claim. So then, worst happens if you lose, everybody splits that 5,000. 3
Right.
ways, 5 ways, 10 ways, 100 ways. Yep.
So that's huge. And these are moves that individuals can do. And that's where we think the most power will be when individuals participate in these types of things, and that will prevent and certainly distract the ones who are kind of just going along to get along, and they're actually thinking they're somehow. Although I am suspicious that a lot of these people know that it's wrong, but they don't want to stick their necks out. But maybe if we force them into a situation through peaceful means, of course, through the small claims court, it might get them to wake up to the idea that, wait a minute here, they're calling me to count here.
The thing is, I would expect that they all know they're doing something wrong, but they don't care enough about the harm to take any, personal hit
Accountability.
For it. So if, for example, we were thinking the other day, even if one teacher got sued, that would just resonate everywhere, not even just in that school. It would, did you hear this? Did you hear this? Did you hear this? And they're going to think, oh, Christ, I'm next. Right. And you're probably going to see some rising up,
Right.
so not to get sued. Right. And it will cause a stir, no doubt.
And some folks who might already be uncomfortable with this nonsense already might actually be now empowered to say, well, hey, right? Yeah, well, hey, I don't want to have that happen to me, right? And they start by telling their principal, right? And whoever's telling them what to do to say, hey, no, I'm not going to do this. And then they might even start talking to their union reps, right? And start, that weren't doing a very good job a couple years ago and start, right?
This is what it's there for. We just got to use it. Use it or lose it. The same old. And also, just one last thing.
Please.
People that present to you in these terms of us and them, they're way over there and they have all the power. We can't influence them, and they're not doing what is in our interest. And that's a very, how do you say? It's a wrong depiction, for one thing. And it's disempowering to people when you're presenting to them. Like you're trying to advocate to exit the system. And that's what they present to you. Like you have no power. They have all the power. That's not even true. We are acting, or we are believing to some degree that they have all the power, but they don't. They don't have any of the power. The people have all the power, and it can only be one way or another. There's no combination. So it's either people have all the power or the state has all the power. And in our situation now, in a democracy, the people have all the power. So, and I'm not saying that their behavior is not, whatever, like I'm calling it actually criminal. So I'm not saying it's acceptable. But the problem that we're facing right now is not because they have all the power and they're doing this to us. It's because we let them act as though they have all the power. And now we need to realize, that this was our mistake. This was our mistake. Okay. And we have to correct this mistake by saying, hey ho, enough, get back in line, down a few notches here, and let's run this show the way it's supposed to be run, by the people.
I love it. It's great, girl. Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for this interview. And I know that a lot of people really appreciate all the information that you're putting out there, and you're inspiring them to start moving. So thank you for your time. And go ahead. I'm going to let you to say.
Good night. Yeah. Bye, Dom. Bye, Kate.
And don't forget that whole, what do you guys do all the time?
Hashtag, we got this.
All right. God bless, girl.